Now.
This is a part of the.
You sure can. You sure can. Still an option. It just starts sprinkling. I mean,
You want to swap?
Yeah. Thanks for the endorsement, Kyle.
it did go down yesterday. But only two committee members were there. That's 20 Yeah. There's a lot of people. Combination.
I heard.
People get lots of those people. Of
course, it's over, right? That's always.
Isn't something that didn't happen then? For
Probably. I think they're gonna move us though.
Nice.
I think it's a crowd.
All right, I think we'll get started. I'm going to call the June 16th, 2026 regular meeting of the Cook County Grand Marais Joint Economic Development Authority to order at 4 p.m. Are we live? We're live. Oh, beautiful. Great. Commissioners present include Clissold, Mills, Beatty Buttigieg, Shackleton, Anderson, Benson, and Eliason. First item is approval of the agenda. The agenda was provided to commissioners in advance of the meeting. I'd ask for requests for any additions or changes.
I'd like to make a motion to add an agenda item,
Please.
Regarding, real quick, simple reporting requirements for the Business Development Fund Grant Program, specific to the reporting form and some additions for photo documentation and contract.
Okay. Thank you. I'll add that after immediately last time in the new business. That's okay.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
I've got one other change, if I may, and that is just given the wonderful audience that we've got here this afternoon to move the Stantec presentation up to essentially the first item of new business after review of the financials, just out of respect for these folks' time.
I'll withdraw my motion and then make it again with that amendment to it.
Is there a second? I'll second all that. All those in favor of approving the amended agenda?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. First item is public comments. Any members of the public that wish to speak to items not in today's agenda, please state your name for the public record and your up.
Any more chairs?
There's a couple up front. Last call for public comments. Seeing none, we'll close the public comment section. Next item, approval of the minutes. This is the May 19th, 2026 EDA regular meeting minutes. You'll find them on pages 1 through 3 in the packet. Any changes or discussion regarding the May minutes? Is there a motion to approve?
Approve.
Second. Thank you. Any other comments, questions? No? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next item is a review of the financials. I'll turn it over to Treasurer Shackleton, but the material starts on page 4 of the packet and runs through page 16. That's inclusive of the EDA, Superior National, and both 2025 and 2026 business development fund grant reports.
Okay, Mark? Thank you. The EDA finances in particular, looking at a cash balance of $183,000, checking account $130,000 approximately in the money market. $130 of that $1,000 is earmarked for the golf course closing, which is sometime in August. We do get our first levy payment from the county in the month of June as well. So as far as expenses go from me, they're all in line with budget. And the golf course for the month of May, some of the financial information is not included in the P&Ls. We're missing some inventory items from the golf course. I just got them later today. But the revenue for the month of May was up over last year by about 30%, a little bit down from 2 years prior. So they had a nice May. Cash flow was about $15,000 to $20,000 positive for the month of May. Their bank account sitting at $266, so it's healthy. And so far June has been pretty good. Anyone has any questions?
One of the things that we can do perhaps in the next golf committee meeting is reforecast the inventory position at the end of August, because I think the pro forma was assuming $60,000, I think, of inventory,
Right
but
now
that was at the end of March.
Yeah, we're at 110 plus for merchandise and another 10,000 for food and beverage.
Good. You would roughly anticipate that to hold steady?
The merchandise number will drop a little bit as we get into August, but food and beverage is
That's part of the healthier than
yeah.
pro forma, that's good news. Any other questions for Commissioner Shackleton? So the EDA Commissioners accept and forward to audit the balance sheet as of May 31st, 2026 for both the EDA and Superior National. Is there a motion to approve May 2026 payments?
Motion approved.
Support? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And carries. All right, that takes us then to new business in our amended agenda. And our first item is the Taconite Harbor Strategic Plan presentation by Stantec. We've got representation from Stantec Consulting to provide a brief presentation on the advisory committee process and the results for Taconite Harbor. Just as a reminder, the EDA secured grant funding from Minnesota DEEP to support both construction of a new waste transfer station here in Grand Marais and also undertake the strategic planning process for Taconite Harbor. And this presentation this afternoon actually follows a public meeting held yesterday in Schroeder that Stantec held that was open to community members. And I also want to recognize my fellow advisory committee members that invested so much time in this process over the last several months, including some time again this afternoon. So thank you very much. I'll turn it over to Stantec.
Thanks, Peter. Do you think this is okay? Should I try and do the slideshow mode or?
Sure, you can try to do that, yeah,
Okay.
I think that will be fine, but it is showing your screen now.
Okay, I wonder if I need to. Sorry, technical difficulties.
No rush.
I think I need to unshare. Oh no, I lost it.
Now there's a rush.
Yeah, there's a rush, okay.
Did you screen share?
Yeah, I think I need to be in
Slideshow mode?
slideshow mode, perhaps,
sure.
and then do screen share.
Or one of these two? Yeah, I guess. Yeah,
Okay, there we go, that's better. Okay, well, thank you for allowing us to be here to present on the Taconite Harbor Advisory Committee process. As you know, the EDA initiated this last fall. And we have been working very diligently with our advisory committee over the last several months to go through this process of coming to some visions for the future of the Taconite Harbor site. Peter, as you mentioned, there are a couple members of our advisory committee that are in the audience tonight. I also just wanted to specifically point out that we have Carla Vida from DEED as well in the audience. DEED was the funder for this grant to be able to do this work. And then we also have Michael Scherenbrock and potentially Kurt at some point from Minnesota Power that will be in the audience here too, and they said they're happy to answer any questions. So if anything comes to your brain. And let's see here. How to go forward. Okay, perfect. So our agenda, we'll go through a little bit of an introduction. We'll talk about the advisory committee process and what that looked like. We'll talk through some of the educational sessions that the advisory committee went through to learn about the Taconite Harbor property, and specifically important things that they would need to know to envision a future for that site or for any potential use. And then we've got a couple of our advisory committee members that are going to walk through their visions, the visions that were kind of co-created through this process, Vision A and Vision B, for lack of a better term. And then we'll go very briefly through kind of an implementation roadmap as well. I will say I'm going to kind of whip through some of this information, so if there are things that you want me to speak more to, feel free to interrupt me. Otherwise, we'll have plenty of time at the end as well to come back to things as needed. So by way of introduction, I'm Lauren Wahlberg. I'm a senior planner with Stantec. Stantec was hired to facilitate this advisory committee process and kind of strategic plan for the future of Taconite Harbor. And I was the lead throughout this process. And then we also have John Chardlow, who's in the audience. He has been our fearless senior advisor / just wealth of knowledge throughout this entire process. And then Jacob Wolmer is not here today, but he was our project manager from the Stantec side. I would be remiss if I did not say the biggest giant thank you to the advisory committee that you assembled. Just by way of introduction, so the advisory committee applied for this position and was selected by the EDA. You guys just did such a great job of selecting this group of people. It really represented a wide swath of both Lake and Cook counties, different demographics, different life experiences. And we really enjoyed working with this group of people. Amy and Terry are in the audience today. They are going to help to explain the visions. So our advisory committee process, I'm actually going to ask John to come up and briefly go through what this process looked like.
And what button were you pushing?
I was clicking on the screen.
Oh, just touching the screen?
It might help. It might. Oh, there we go.
Okay.
This button now works.
Thank you. Good afternoon. As Lauren has said, one of the key elements of this process was the advisory committee. And one of the aspects of this study that's different maybe from others is that we really focused on providing educational information to this group before we asked them their opinions. That's been kind of a cornerstone of the way we've approached community engagement in recent years. I think it's safe to say that people came to this process with different expectations. And one of the things that I found the most gratifying at the end was when people said, I came thinking this, but after hearing other people say what they thought and talking it through, I could see that that might work too if the following things were in place. That doesn't always happen. So the idea was to come up with a shared vision. And a shared vision doesn't necessarily mean the same land use plan, but it talks about shared expectations for the future of the property. And we talked about two alternative scenarios, one of which was more focused on light industrial, kind of replacing jobs that were lost, and the other one was more a transition to mixed use development. And again, Amy and Terry will be talking about that. And then we also wanted to provide information to folks so they could understand the different path to implementation for those different strategies, because obviously they require different levels of environmental review. There would be different funding sources available to help them. There'd be different partners that the county would work with and that Minnesota Power would work with. I want to pause just for a second and say that we were clear with the committee from the very beginning that Minnesota Power owns the land. And Minnesota Power was a great partner in this process. They were open, they came to every meeting, but they also made it clear that whatever happens has to fit their business goals as well. And so I think it's important that that conversation and that dialogue continues. So very quickly, we divided up the educational sessions into three. The first was just the physical aspects of the site. How big is it? What shape is it? What's its topography? Vegetation, soils, infrastructure, access, all those sorts of things. So people can understand kind of what's possible. Land has different suitability, and what's this property suitable for? We had a tour of the site yesterday, and it doesn't do justice to look at it on paper. You have to see it in the flesh. It's really a stunning piece of ground with amazing development potential, whichever way it goes. And so it's important to understand that. The second one was on December 17th, and that was environmental issues. The property was going through the process of decommissioning, so we helped people understand what that was involved with, and to the extent that we could, what information was coming out of that process. We also did a pretty deep dive in terms of the whole environmental review process and what level of environmental review is required for different scenarios. The third, on January 7th, was economic. That was kind of basic market research. It was the results of interviews with a number of different stakeholders within the market area, but also a comprehensive review of funding sources. And there's a different roadmap for funding for each of the two different scenarios. So with that information in mind, we facilitated a process with the advisory committee where we basically gave them work sessions, worksheets that raised some questions and allowed them to say what they thought were the highest priorities, what they thought was the most important things to accomplish, what they saw as the biggest risks if the process didn't go well. And with that information, our team developed two very high-level scenarios. And we made it clear that these were not land use plans, these were not concept plans, these were basically bubble diagrams drawn to scale that showed what could be accommodated on the site. And we reviewed that with the committee, and after that they were refined. And with the refined scenarios, we put together the implementation strategies. So I'm going to turn it back to Lauren, who's going to give you a summary of kind of the key takeaways from those educational seminars.
All right, thanks, John. So this is the portion that I'm going to whip through relatively quickly. We have a number of slides, so again, stop me if you have questions. So our kickoff meeting we had with the advisory committee in person. We went through some of the historical context of the Taconite Harbor site. We feel pretty strongly that it's so important to understand the history and also just the feelings of the community towards this site to understand any type of reuse here. So we did do a little bit of a deep dive on the history of the site and the history of Taconite Harbor as a town with the advisory committee at that kickoff meeting. As John mentioned, our next session was the physical context. This matters because, every property is different, and every property has its intrinsic suitability, so size, shape, topography, as well as the conditions associated with human activity, including the past human activity, the infrastructure that exists at the site, the policy and regulatory framework within which that site exists. All of that informs what's possible. The scope of work for the committee, or for us to inform the committee, was a desktop investigation of physical conditions, existing infrastructure, and then we went through some opportunities and constraints that were posed by the findings of that desktop review. like John said, we reached out to a number of folks who were involved in providing information for these sessions. So I've got those up on the screen. I'll also say that when we post this presentation online, there are links at the bottom to where people can get more information. So as I'm whipping through, if there's something that catches your eye, please check out that link. We reviewed some planning and zoning information with the advisory committee. As we know, the historic use as well as the current zoning of the site is heavy industrial. So that means that any scenario, any reuse will require a planning and a permitting process with Cook County, who is the land use authority for this piece of land. Another key takeaway, there is some topography on this property. So there are actually, as you can kind of see in this diagram, two main buildable areas. There's an upper portion, and then there's a bluff, and there's a lower portion that's down by the lake. That impacts the developability of the property. The bluff specifically, as well as being adjacent to Lake Superior, means that there is a process with which you go through to put any use on this property. So some infrastructure key takeaways. Natural gas, the nearest natural gas line is 22 miles away in Silver Bay. Depending on the reuse of this land, that could be a limiting factor. Electric generation, as we know, the site used to have a coal plant on it. That's no longer there. So that is a loss of that electric generation that used to be on the site and in this area regionally. Again, depending on the reuse, that could potentially be a constraint. As we know, this property is also not on city water, not on city sewer, so it would need to likely be developed on well and septic. Again, depending on the reuse, that could be a limiting factor. And finally, site access. We did identify that should this property be used for something more intensive than it currently is or was, that there likely will need to be some upgrades to the site access, potentially an additional turn lane onto Highway 61, and potentially some pavement widening there on Highway 61, which we know MnDOT is currently going through a process of studying that, so that could potentially be an opportunity to get some of those priorities in front of them. Again, when we look at infrastructure, there are a lot of very specific analyses that can be done to kind of understand more. A lot of those analyses just don't make sense to do at this point where we are at such a high level. But once a more specific reuse is identified, once we have more information on the type of development that this may be, those more specific analyses can be done to kind of inform further what's possible. So just to wrap up the physical context, we did put together just some diagrams of the scale of this site. So while there are constraints potentially to work around, the site is very large. It can accommodate a lot of, a significant amount of development. And just being there yesterday and seeing it in person, I can't say that enough. It's an amazing piece of property. So environmental context, why does this matter? So there are obviously, as the previous use as a coal plant, there are environmental conditions that exist due to that use. There's also environmental context and permitting for any potential reuse that will need to happen. And we felt it was important that our advisory committee knew at least a little bit about this to then go and envision a future use. So again, scope of work, we did a desktop analysis of the natural characteristics and resources, a desktop review of the a desktop phase 1 environmental site assessment, and then as John mentioned, a review of kind of expected mandatory reviews, permits, environmental review, or approvals that might be needed for a couple of differing uses. So I just want to, pause and say, We know that, there are former uses of this site that include a variety of heavy industrial uses. Many of these uses were developed and were operational in a time before there were environmental regulations. Today's environmental regulations came to be in the 60s and 70s, so we wanted to be really clear that, like, if there is environmental contamination, it's not, there's no fault, right? It's like it was developed in a time where practices once deemed routine, may now be frowned upon, and that's just the reality. So we also wanted to understand a little bit about the condition of the site. Obviously, we were not able to be on site. We did a desktop review. So the site is remediated to industrial standards. In order for it to be developed for other things, there may need to be more cleanup involved. So you see this diagram on the screen. It kind of goes a continuum from more cleanup needed to less cleanup needed. So, like I said, clean to industrial standards. So, an industrial use likely is not going to trigger additional cleanup. On that continuum, commercial uses potentially could require additional cleanup prior to being developed on the site. Green space, and these get progressively more cleanup is needed as there's more contact with the soils. So green space where people are, enjoying the land would require additional cleanup, and then residential uses, again, would require additional cleanup prior to being developed.
I have just one question.
Yeah.
Is there a distinction between what's owned by Minnesota Power and Cleveland Cliffs when you say what has been cleaned up to and to what standards?
Yes, great question. So the site that we have mainly been focusing on throughout this effort is the former coal plant, the Taconite Harbor Energy Center site that is owned by Minnesota Power. So that's specifically what I'm referring to.
Thank you.
Yep. So again, permitting and environmental review starts to get complex, but I think the key takeaway here is that any redevelopment at this state will require a complex state and local and potentially even federal environmental review and permitting process. Like I said, we looked at a couple of different uses. Again, not to get ahead of the visioning process, but to give the advisory committee an idea of if X, then then what. So different paths towards redevelopment. Okay, so the economic context, why this matters. It's really important to understand what is feasible, what the demand might be for different development types at this site, and in order to land on visions that would be realistic for future development. We also did a little bit of funding research to understand, what might be possible as far as additional funding to help these potential future uses come to fruition. So again, the scope of the work, like John said, we talked to a number of local folks who know the market conditions and the development conditions a lot better than we do. Then that really helped inform our analysis. And we specifically focused on, what makes this site and this location potentially more suitable than other locations. So we did do a little bit of a dive into the mining economy, just specifically to understand the future of the Cleveland Cliffs property, because we know that is the neighbor to this site. And that's important to understand what potentially could happen to the Cleveland Cliffs site in order to inform what is possible at the Taconite Harbor Energy Center site, its neighbor. So where we landed is we can't assume that the Cleveland Cliffs facility will be going away anytime in the near future. And any reuse at the Taconite Harbor Energy Center site will need to work around that as a neighbor, at least at this point. Future conversations could help solidify and inform that further. Again, similar to the environmental, the approach we took with the environmental session, we wanted to look at a couple of different paths and different development scenarios. So this is not to preclude other scenarios or other ideas, but to give an idea of what's possible. So our key takeaway here is that the site is attractive for many different types of development. This could include industrial or business, could include resort or tourism, and could include residential or neighborhood development. These are all potentially viable. And you can see on the screen here, there are a number of conditions that could make them more or less viable. And then finally, like I said, we focused a little bit on funding. Funding is all about kind of finding the strategic match to what you need. So there are planning grants, there are grants for specific types of development, and it kind of is about finding what the best fit is. Another thing that our funding specialist said that I just thought was important, there's no such thing as free money. There's always going to be reporting that comes along with that money. Sometimes there are a variety of conditions associated with the grant, so that's something, to go into eyes wide open. So in just a minute here, I'm going to have Amy and Terry come up and talk through these advisory committee visions. I'll just really briefly go through our process here. So, and John went through this, so I won't spend a ton of time, but like John said, we had the advisory committee go through a questionnaire to respond to specific questions about the opportunities and the risks of development at this site. We had the committee members actually present to each other what their future visions of the site were. And then based on those presentations and the responses to the questionnaire, we came up with 2 different visions, so Vision A and Vision B. Like John said, we had our advisory committee review these, for lack of a better term, blob diagrams of the future visions and provide us with input. And then we came up with kind of an implementation roadmap to what the next steps might be. And finally, we had our public open house last night, and I'll give just a little teaser in a minute here of what we heard at that open house. A little teaser, yeah. So one of the questions that we had our advisory committee respond to was their priority for reuse. And I just wanted to pop this up here. You can see, and these were all relatively close. So just because one is higher than the other doesn't mean that it was the overwhelming favorite. But reuse that prioritizes economic development, tax base, and employment definitely was important to the advisory committee. Reuse that realizes the full benefits of the harbor. I can't say that enough. I think almost every single advisory committee member, and to the extent that we heard that from the public last night as well, the marina as an asset and taking advantage of that was something that came through loud and clear. So I think instead of reading through this whole list, I think I will pass it off to Amy to talk a little bit about Vision A.
I am Amy Brugge. I have been a resident of Schroeder for 10 years. I live about 1.5 miles to 2 miles down the road from this site. It's been wonderful to participate in this committee. Stantec has done a great job in terms of organizing us, process, educating the group. This first vision you're going to see is multi-purpose, but we're labeling it as creative, industrial, and business. This particular parcel, in terms of current zoning, has a segment that is zoned for heavy industrial use, as well as a segment that is zoned residential, right next to each other. And you'll see some themes both between Vision A and Vision B in terms of taking advantage of that harbor, considering housing, but then kind of a different purpose in the middle area where you see purple on this So if we start at the water, there is the idea of a marina, perhaps with amenities and services. We could think about not just having boats there, but also boat repair, storage, things like that. There are not many marina opportunities as you travel along the North Shore, so it would be great to leverage that given that it exists here. You can see then that next to that, the purple closest to the water, is labeled a segment for port and logistics. That is part of why this particular vision is thinking about industrial or business use. There is not new ports being built necessarily along Lake Superior, and this could leverage that. There's then that bluff area that Lauren talked about, where we have a kind of a change in the topography, and so as you go further inland, this vision focuses on what would it look like to have light industrial, green industrial, different types of business commercial use, and I'll give you some pictures of that in just a moment. There would be a need for some infrastructure in terms of roads developed within the site there. And then you can see as you get closer towards Highway 61 off to the side, that one segment that's yellow is labeled as a housing potential, whether that's multifamily. We had people on the committee that talked about what would it look like to have assisted living, given the demographics of the county, or even neighborhood development. This keeps in place the future thought that the Gitchagami Trail would come through on this side of Highway 61. So if you look at kind of a written version of this, I know this is pretty dense, but the idea here is this parcel as currently zoned is one of the few properties that has industrial zoning in our county. And would be, at this point, remediated to an industrial zoning level. There is a segment, like I said, that is zoned for housing, so we would try to leverage that, probably workforce-oriented housing. That would be most likely. The advantages of this particular vision is that it is probably a more near to midterm vision, in that you could go after those different developments segmentally without having to necessarily go through the same zoning changes. So here's some pictures of what it could look like, right? If we think about in Silver Bay, a marina, imagine that, but there in Schroeder, having, like I said, different marina amenities, boat services. There's a sample picture. Or more industrial, a port, you can see that on the bottom corner. And that segment, like we said, topographically sits below. This vision does not include any sort of landscape buffer between the Taconite Harbor Energy Site and what belongs to Cleveland Cliffs. That would be left alone, which is going to be different from what you see in Vision B. We were talking through different industrial options. There was discussion around biochar, storage, leasing commercial space. Think of it as like a mid-size industrial park. Again, supporting the local economy, but as I mentioned before, we know that jobs also need housing. So that becomes kind of the two purposes that we see in this vision. And these are some samples of what that could possibly look like. Questions about this, or are we going to wait and do questions all at the end? Questions at the end? Yeah. There should be, when we talk through the implementation plan, there should be a note that obviously the housing piece will likely require greater remediation to the land. Yes, it is zoned as that right now and has been vacant, but that may need additional review before thinking about a housing development. But otherwise, heavy industrial zoning is one of the few parcels in the region that currently has that. And so we were looking to have one vision that aligns and could bring economic development to the area. Like I said, probably more of a early to midterm kind of plan in terms of flexibility, where you could do different segments over time to realize kind of the fuller vision. Okay, and I'll turn it over to Terry to talk about Vision B.
You want to show me the
Yep, it's this one, right here. Arrow.
Thank you. Hi there, I'm Terry Hartman, almost a full-time resident. I live our home is in Laveau Ridge, and we're there, like I say, almost full-time, but I still travel back to the Twin Cities for some business. Again, our home is in the neighborhood of this, so it was of interest to me to be a part of it. Not that I want to call the shots on what it is, but certainly as we live in that area, like to be a part of that planning effort. Vision B is interesting in that Stantec did a great job here of bringing together 12 or 15 people in a room with a variety of exciting and different ideas, and they pulled them together into one plan. And I think they did a great job of bringing that all together, sort of this large group of thoughts and ideas and creativity. I'm going to read right from their narrative here. So, Vision B as a mixed-use development leverages the site's exceptional natural assets, including the deep water protected harbor, Highway 61 visibility, to create a compact, walkable mixed-use development that serves the North Shore travelers as well as the year-round residents in the area. The redevelopment will blend a recreational harbor and marina, destination hospitality, a mix of higher density housing, coastal themed restaurants and retail, a boardwalk oriented public shoreline access, and all of it supported with mixed use services and a pedestrian scaled street grid. The development, of course, will be designed to protect the water quality and the shoreline character and honor the site's history through interpretation and placemaking, and remain as adaptable to that adjacent working waterfront and compatible industrial shipping uses so that those can coexist as the market needs and technology evolves. Vision B has 5 major components of fundamental different land uses. The marina at the harbor, park and recreation use at the shoreline, a resort and event venue in the central portion of the site, retail and mixed use at the highway, and housing in the northeast portion of the site, similar to Vision A. There are 2 secondary uses I want to point out because they tend to get missed a little bit. Stantec's group brought together a really nice landscape buffer between the Cleveland Cliff site and as well as this group of mixed uses. In addition to that, at that landscape buffer, there needs to be an access drive to the lower portion of the Cleveland Cliff site, because this site is obligated to provide access for Cleveland Cliff use. The marina, I'm sorry,
we're obligated to provide access to the marina for Cleveland Cliffs?
this site has an easement across it that provides access for the Cleveland Cliff folks to get to that lower portion of their site. So there needs to be a way to get across this property with large vehicles to get across this site to get to the lower portion of the Cleveland Cliff site. There, as far as we know, there's an easement that's recorded, but we assume that access location can change, and it would be a part of our street system that gets developed with this new development scenario. The marina portion of the site at the water level, again, this page includes some photographs of not only Silver Bay in the upper left corner, the Silver Bay Marina, but some other similar and also integrated marina photographs in other areas. The difference here is we would not only obviously have the marina and the boat slips for recreational use, but also a small component of commercial, where you may have a restaurant, small-scale restaurant that overlooks and serves that marina public, as well as small shops and offices, again, at that shoreline marina level. Shops and offices that may directly service the marina. Obviously, administrative office for the marina, shower facilities, bathroom facilities, but also small-scale restaurant, offices, let's say for marine service or marine supply, bait and tackle, and also boat storage, boat repair, and boat brokerage. This is another idea for, at this level, small-scale commercial. Park and recreation use at the shoreline is thought of as a linear greenway along the shoreline. An important component to this is that the public has access. It's not owned, private shoreline owned by a resort or owned by a larger entity. This is public access. Overlooking the marina, but also thought of as a boardwalk or a meandering trail. All season use, wide enough for people to gather for thoughts of, say, a small scale amphitheater. Boardwalk in architecture, recreation in nature, and entertainment functions as well. All season use, which may include certainly winter landscaping, nightscaping, appropriate streetscaping that makes this a place for people to want to gather. The resort and hotel component of the site is in the central part of it. Certainly takes the most advantage of the views overlooking the lake and the rugged shoreline and the foothills. It straddles that natural bluff area that was described earlier. And it certainly could be one or two resort or event venue uses. There's some examples here of photographs of local resorts, but certainly this architecture is a good example, not what it has to be, but what it could be. Hotel use, condominium or vacation rental use, and certainly the recreation amenities that go along with those private uses. So a pool or a fire pits or a sport court that's inherent to those resorts is why recreation here is listed as a separate use. Those would be more proprietary or part of the resort. The retail and mixed use happens at the highway, and it takes advantage of the convenient access and the visibility of the highway. And this is where we would see an expanded opportunity for retail goods and services for the area, not just again for the traveling public, but for the year-round residents in the area, in an area of the county that's underserved with retail goods and services. So along the highway, certainly restaurants, shops and offices, small boutique or specialty stores, to include things like an outfitter, art galleries, restaurant, community spaces that don't exist out in that area. Fuel and convenience stores, pretty obvious. Deli or general store type use. All of this supporting each other. The housing component, similar to Vision A, it's in the northeast portion of the site that already is zoned for residential, but it acts as a transition to our lower density neighbors to the northeast. And again, recognizing that there's a need for workforce housing, there's also a need for senior housing in the area. The form and shape certainly is multifamily. It's apartments, attached, or condos, or townhomes. Again, serving workforce housing as well as seniors with an idea that assisted living is an important need in the area, and that should what would be pursued on this site. Vision B has some key takeaways. Again, just a reminder that some of the images and ideas are just that. They're photographs of other areas and other contexts, not exactly suited 100% for this site, but conceptual in nature. I used for conveying discussions and for the communication of what people thought is the good mix. This scenario introduces housing, hospitality, parks, and retail on land that is zoned heavy industrial. That's gonna require some major regulatory changes and some additional cleanup. Depending on higher level remediation and a comprehensive plan amendment, rezoning, environmental reviews, and some pretty complex and special financing layers to pull this off. It also faces a little bit of challenge with the compatibility with Cleveland Cliffs. And that certainly is gonna affect the process of implementing this. This is also a longer term vision, something that would take more time and be done through phasing. And as I would see it, I would see this as more of an incremental development that evolves over time, much like a town would evolve over time, and on a much longer timeline.
Okay, thanks Terry and Amy. So I said I'd give you a little teaser of what we heard at the open house. So like Peter said, we had an open house last night at Schroeder Town Hall. We had about 50 or so people come through, so pretty good attendance. The key themes, what we heard from the general public mirrored a lot of the discussions that we had with the advisory committee. So I would say general support for both visions, maybe a slight preference for the mixed use vision, but definitely, you know, people who had an interest in either Vision A or Vision B. A strong interest again in the marina development, which like I said, we heard loud and clear from our advisory committee. And then there were people that focused in on, you know, kind of certain risks. So the unknowns around Cleveland Cliffs. That was a discussion that we had with our advisory committee, probably every single time we met. And then there's the other risks associated with environmental cleanup, the permitting timeline that it could take, you know, specifically for Vision B, but potentially for Vision A as well. And then a desire really for balanced development. So development that includes jobs, that includes housing, potentially includes tourism, while avoiding some, you know, kind of incompatibility in uses, which could also include the neighbor of Cleveland Cliffs. And then finally, what we heard is, you know, there is a desire for kind of clarity and continued momentum for something to happen at Tech at Night Harbor. You know, we've kind of been saying all along, this visioning process is the first step. You've now taken the first step, but there are a lot more steps to be taken, and kind of continued momentum, a needed project champion, or somebody to, you know, kind of lead those next steps. I'll also, you know, again, say a reminder, Minnesota Power owns this land. Nothing is gonna happen without further discussions with them, viewing them as a partner. So I think, you know, we heard that a little bit from the public, is there's some concern around, you know, what's gonna happen here? When is it gonna happen? So I wanna do just a quick pause. That's been a lot of information. I have a couple more slides to go through that do a little bit of a teaser of our implementation roadmap, but I wanna just pause really quickly. If there are questions on either Vision A or Vision B, I'm happy to take those now. If you want me to just keep going and get through the 5 or so more slides I have, let me know.
Keep rolling.
Okay, I'll keep rolling. I'll pause at the end. So, implementation roadmap. Like I just said, Minnesota Power owns this land. Nothing will happen here without their participation. They are in the room. That says a lot. They have been with us through this entire process. They've attended each and every one of our advisory committee sessions. They have provided information to the advisory committee that has been invaluable. So yeah, I think that says a lot. These vision scenarios, again, are very general. It is not possible for us to do a full implementation roadmap of every specific step that you need to take to make either of these visions come to fruition until we've got a more specific plan and a more specific design. Cleveland Cliffs owns the adjoining land. They chose not to participate in this process. And they do retain, the zoning, they retain certain permits for their property, they retain the rights and responsibilities to the harbor and to their property. So that is something that, will need to be managed. Both Vision and Vision A and Vision B have a long path to implementation. I know Amy mentioned Vision A potentially, being a little bit of a shorter term, Vision B being a longer term, but I don't want to undersell that both have a long path to implementation. Well, the ultimate reuse of the land will probably be phased. There may be some interim uses that could make sense during that time. Either of these visions will, like I said, require a project champion, someone to take the next steps, move this forward. And again, this implementation road step, like I said, does not identify every single step you'll need to take. That requires additional work, more specific plans. So this will need to be updated, I guess is what I'm saying also. So for our advisory committee, we broke down implementation into 4 different buckets. So there's policy changes that can happen. There are development steps that can be taken. There are environmental and permitting steps that will need to be taken for either scenario. And then there's funding, which will likely be needed for anything to happen here. So I'm going to go through, like I said, kind of a teaser of the implementation roadmap. This isn't the full thing. That's, again, for the public at this link in the presentation, which will be posted online. So for development, something that we wanted to kind of reiterate with the advisory committee and also with you is as much as you can do to kind of reduce ambiguity and build trust, that will kind of help you take these next steps. So when there is uncertainties, when there are risks, which there certainly, kind of still are with this site, people guess. What we can do to kind of combat that is focus on reducing what we can of those uncertainties and those risks. So we, we are honest. You're honest with the public. You have public processes that are accessible, a predictable process, plain language maps as much as possible, and we do what we can to kind of reduce those uncertainties and risk from a development perspective. We want to have both a feasible and a trustworthy site. So people like consistency, they like certainty, they need it to be clear. And this goes for both the general public, but also developers and investors. So we want to, as much as possible throughout the implementation process, reduce that guessing, reduce those uncertainties and risk, especially with a site that is this complicated and has uncertainty and risk just by nature. So that's the goal. We also did a little bit of analysis on potential funding sources. So there are potential funding sources that apply to both Vision A and Vision B. Could be used for either. And I should say these funding amounts are what is available nationally. This isn't necessarily what could be obtained specifically for Taconite Harbor. So there's planning style grants, that may be particularly important in the next couple of years, or whenever it's chosen to kind of move forward with further planning for this site. There are trail grants, there's water and sewer grants, and then there are grants that are available for all uses. And these lists include both grants that are available at the federal level, which tend to change and shift a lot. So this is a snapshot of what's available right now, but could be different even a year from now. And then there are also grants that are available at the state level, a little bit more consistent there. And then finally, there are potential funding sources that are specifically available or could be specifically applicable to either Vision A or Vision B. So this is grants that could be applicable to Vision A, light industrial grants, road grants, that is, is quite a bit of funding available for infrastructure type, infrastructure funding. Port, marina, environmental cleanup type grants, as well as housing. And then for Vision B, some of the same things, again, roads and infrastructure, parks and recreation type grants, both at the federal as well as the state level, housing, environmental, and marina related grants. So a couple of key takeaways before I open it up for questions. So this site has a rich history, and that is important to celebrate. Along with that rich history comes strong grant eligibility as a former energy community. Obviously, you've already been successful in obtaining some grant funding to do this process, so that should, continue. The lack of public site control could potentially be a constraint. What we say is start with what you have and try to create kind of phases of public access to this site. So that could be public access to the marina, it could be a public park, certainly building on the public access that is already available with the DNR Small Craft Harbor could be a potential opportunity and a place to start. The harbor infrastructure is an asset, but again, investment in that public access and public space is going to be important and could be a first step. Environmental cleanup continues, and like we've said, there may be constraints related to or additional cleanup needed to potentially realize either of these visions. The limited utilities and remote location also kind of shape what's possible, but it also provides an opportunity for there to be some interesting pilot projects or interim uses on the site. And then finally, as much as you can provide policy clarity on what could be developed here, so if there is a potential developer who comes in, they understand what the process is and what is allowed versus what's not allowed, especially with having these community visions. I think it's important to, kind of have the community's visions reflected in that policy and what you want to see for the future of the site. So with that, I will open it up for questions and discussion. For me, or like I said, for the folks from Minnesota Power who are in the room, there are a couple advisory committee members in the room as well.
Lauren, we should just clarify that the area that's zoned residential has never been developed industrially.
Yes, let me go back to that. I'm just gonna go to the zoning page if I can.
So that could be developed residentially without the level of cleanup we've been talking about throughout the presentation.
Goodness, there we go. So that's the portion of the property that's on the other side of the current access road.
And that's clean.
Yes, so that is the location in Vision A where we have shown housing. Vision B includes housing on both portions of the land.
Were there houses in this before? The previous residential?
So, Kyle, I think you were saying that there was a house here, at least at one point.
Right by the highway, right where the road comes off the highway, there was a house there at one point. And I don't know if it was LTV that, that they took it down at the well. So I think there was one house there. Other than that, the only thing that was over on that side that was there was the sewer.
And then does Cliff have access to the harbor? They have free use of the harbor?
They do have access, and like we were saying, it will be required to maintain that access through this
They could
property.
bring their own boats into that harbor anytime I wish, at any time?
Yeah, so there is, and Michael actually probably could speak to this better than me, but there is joint responsibility over the harbor. I believe, yes, they would be able to bring boats into that harbor. And as far as maintenance goes, there is like and Michael, you can speak to this better, but like there's joint responsibilities.
Yep, shared maintenance responsibilities between Cliffs and Minnesota Power.
And that's as long as either own the property, so it's a long-term thing, it's not a lease or a negotiated agreement, okay.
One voice I haven't heard about, and so when I gave you that spreadsheet of everybody around our county might have information for you. One of the people that we reached out to was IRRR, and they gave us a person that they wanted interacting.
Yep.
Was she able to interact and participate? Have you heard much from IRRR?
Yeah, great question. So IRRR has been engaged at a couple points in the process. So specifically when we were developing content for the economic session, we reached out and we spoke to a couple, there were a couple folks that we spoke to who provided both context to the mining economy, but also just kind of general development context for the region. And then we also, and Carla can maybe remind me who we spoke to, but we spoke with DEED as well as IRRR when we were starting to think about implementation and starting to talk a little bit about funding. Because we know that IRRR is a wonderful community partner and a large funder in this area of the region. So they have been engaged through a couple points during the process. I believe they also, Carla, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe they also have a role in the grant. No, okay. I misspoke. They do not have a role in the grant, but.
Thank you. When we think of site remediation, I don't wanna go in the weeds about this, cause everyone's aware of that. I mean, you don't even have to say anything, we all know. But that said, I will ask one question. How much of the ponds above are part of that conversation for site remediation?
How much of the
The ponds that sit up above
The ponds above.
are affected or are part of that
Above the
conversation?
highway.
Or maybe that's not something you looked at, that's okay, just say that we didn't.
We didn't look at that specifically. Yeah, we didn't look at that specifically. Courtney, who's our environmental scientist, may have touched on that a little bit. I'm not remembering off of the top of my head, but we didn't specifically dig into that at a deep level. And again, all of the environmental kind of context was at a desktop level. So we didn't actually do any like digging in the land and further understanding the conditions.
Okay, thanks.
The Minnesota Power perspective on this, maybe they can speak to this about it too. We have been a party to this, just to say one, are they waiting for someone to make an offer on the property, or are they waiting for a development idea that they like versus not like, and then decide to sell? I mean, I would hate to put a lot of time and money and effort and resources in developing this, and then just say, nah, we're not interested. But what dictates that? How does that get resolved?
Michael, do you want to take that one, or do you want me to kind of speak to it? Okay.
Yeah, Kurt Anderson, I'm the Director of Environmental and Land for Minnesota Power. So, we don't have any plans for the property right now. We're just open to this process. We're looking to see what might come out of it. And if something did materialize that would require some sort of, contract or lease or a purchase option, like I said, we take that back and look at it and compare it to, what other uses the property might have for us. So we're open right now, and we're just waiting to see how this process plays out.
My memory is historically Minnesota Power has looked for people to develop the site without takers. And so my understanding is it's gonna require some public investment. And what we were told previously, with not writing anything, it was just that we didn't have to make the books whole. Now that there's been a transfer of ownership, parent companies. I don't know what the dynamics are, and if anything has changed there. And you probably don't either, but it just gives me a little more pause without knowing that and what relationships we have or don't have too.
Could I just add
Please,
in on
yeah.
that? So the one thing I just wanted to make sure everyone is aware of when we talk about being made whole, it's the assets up there are viewed as Minnesota Power customer assets. So, there would likely be a process with the Minnesota Public Utilities Commission, making sure that, we're recovering appropriate compensation for the land for our customers. So that would be, a state process that we'd have to go through.
I think our group has been, from day one, realizing it is your property. And that's why our first meeting was to come down and meet with you in your offices to see if this conversation could go anywhere at all. And then, like Dave just mentioned, now change of ownership, we're all like wondering, what does that mean? Maybe you guys are too, I don't know. But I think that's been a realization that if you aren't on board and you don't want to be our partner, this goes nowhere. If we can't be helpful for you, then yeah. And we wanted a visioning project to see what are the possibilities that would work for all of us to add economic diversity to this county and to make economic development somewhere besides here in Grand Marais and help the rest of the county have some growth and possibilities as well.
Yeah, to be clear, I haven't seen or heard any signals saying otherwise about what we were talking about before, but Mr. Chair, can we call on Commissioner Kane?
Oh, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the discussion through this process has been the appreciation for the fact that Minnesota Power has given us this opportunity. My question would be if Minnesota Power, in discussing this and looking at this transitioning, if you have identified the best outcome. In other words, when you're looking at what would be the best scenario that we would like to see, and I think sometimes you find that when vision matches, that it just makes it a lot easier. But it'd be interesting to know, in order to understand that from our perspective, what you've identified, if anything, relative to best outcome.
So I can share a little bit about what we have looked at. So obviously we're an energy company and this is a good potential industrial site. So even before this process began, we did look at multiple options, including solar. We have land adjacent as well. That economically did not work out for us. We've looked at things like potential, offshore type of energy production, those types of things. None of those to date have penciled out, but I would say, there's still an important caveat here that, we have ambitious carbon policy goals in the state and we're on our way to meeting those, but any site like this does have the potential to potentially host things like, battery storage, for example, or different things like that. Now, there's nothing in the works right now for this site for those types of projects, but as we were talking about with some of the advisory committee members the other day, we're just trying to keep our options open because land like this, basically a brownfield site that can be developed, that's fairly rare, and to have it under our control is a good thing for us, but we also recognize the challenges with host community transition and the loss of jobs when Taconite Harbor shut down and what that meant for the community. So if a better option comes along, then that we feel would work, then like I said, we would be open to it. We just need to know what that would look like, what the parameters are, and we can take that back to Duluth and discuss with our leadership team. So we have talked with the executive leadership about this, Michael and myself and others, and same message. We're just providing information, waiting to see what happens, and would proceed from there. So we're not opposed or supportive of a sale right now, but just want to see what happens.
So $1 sign.
Any other questions or comments?
Just one. So going back to the list of things that this project would need to get off the ground, you have Minnesota Power ownership. 6 or 7 down, there was a project champion needed, right, to continue momentum. I was looking back at the May 25th, 25 proposal stand that provided with some really nice examples of similar project experience in the past. And now based on what you know on this recent project with us, I mean, who are, in your perspective, from your perspective, what organization, what entity might be a champion that you've potentially identified in our community that could keep this ball rolling?
Good question. So, I mean, it could be the EDA. Likely, or typically champions, at least at the start, are a public entity. So, you know, in this community, that could be the EDA, it could be Cook County, it could be, you know, certainly Schroeder would have some involvement with that. I think, John, can you think of other examples of, you've had a much longer career, a much more storied career than I have in this, so I'm just thinking you might have some other examples of who have been project champions for projects of this magnitude, like, the Ford plant or others.
In that case, it was an EDA. But you also have the partnership with the state, with DEED and IRRB. So a champion isn't necessarily a person. It could be a coordinator coordinating a group of people. It's gonna take multiple touches and multiple funding sources to pull it off. We have a new economic development coordinator who has the opportunity to work on a pretty cool project.
Could I add a note?
Yes,
So I'm
please.
Carla Vida with the Department of Employment and Economic Development and the state's Energy Transition Director. And something you guys might want to explore is even meeting with Ottertail County, how they handled their transition plan and took down their power plant. You might even want to talk to Sherburne County, who's in the midst of doing it right now. And even John Taradlo and his team worked on the Washington County, the Oak Park Heights spot, which I think is very similar to yours because it's along the beautiful St. Croix waterway, just a hop, skip, and a jump to our beautiful Stillwater downtown, and see how they're even looking at those. And I feel very confident all of those cities and counties would be more than happy to share information with you if you wanted to learn what their process has been like. And I can certainly always work with Lucas on that.
Thank you.
Well, that's what I'm.
Sherburne County.
Yeah, Sherburne County, yeah.
And
Spot
I'd
on,
just like to take a moment right now to really thank Carla for supporting us. Yes, get this grant and to get this to where we are right now, so thank you.
Of course.
Commissioner Mills, did you have a comment?
I was just gonna thank everyone a whole bunch, including Carla. But the advisory group especially, it's a lot of time that's put into that and really appreciate perspectives and the work put into that.
I'll second that. Indeed, I want to thank Lauren for doing such a great job of coordinating everything. And the entire Stantec team was terrific to work with. At Minnesota Power, thank you very much for your participation throughout this. That was much appreciated and noted. Carla and your team wouldn't be here without you. But most of all, to the advisory committee. You guys spent a lot of time, as I know, invested in this, and the results showed. So thank you so much.
I was curious, I love the slide with all the funding options. Is there a scope and sequence of those? Like, if you wanted this grant, you have to apply by here, and this one leverages that one, or?
Good question. So Heidi Pepper was the person who put that together, and she actually put together an entire funding matrix as well, which is basically a big spreadsheet of all the grants and all of those details. So we'll make sure that we provide you with that, and that can be available publicly as well. But yeah, she's very detail oriented, like that way.
Right. Again, thank you.
Thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure.
We really do appreciate it. I think there's a long time we never thought we could even a project started, let alone be ready to have some good results.
Yeah.
We appreciate it.
Okay, back to business. The next item on the agenda is consideration of resolution 2026-18. That's approving the Business Development Fund grant awards recommended by the Grant Review Committee. So we have, I believe, some applicants, so we can plan to go through each grant request one by one, so applicants, where applicable, can have the opportunity to address the board and answer any questions from the commissioners. But then, as we did with the last tranche, we do one vote at the end. Now, before we get into these, are there any commissioners that wish to abstain? Any reasons of conflict in any of these three that we'll discuss? Good, all right. So applications for the second round of 2026 Business Development Grant Funds were due back on May the 6th, 2026, and the EDA received 5 applications. And the review committee met to review applications and determine whether additional materials or clarifications are needed. Applicants were provided 7 days to submit supplemental information where most requested. As a reminder, the 2026 BDF budget is $200,000. And the EDA allocated $100,000 to that first funding round, which was in, is that March period? And $86,000, just shy of $100 was awarded. So it left an unallocated balance of nearly $14,000 from the first round. And for this round, the original allocation was $50,000. So we've actually got about $64,000 available for consideration during this second funding cycle. Following review, the committee is recommending 3 grant awards, that's out of the 5 applications, totaling just over $25,000, $25,125. And if approved, this leaves about $88,750-ish available for the third and final funding round in 2026. So as I say, there's 3 that we'll go through, and I believe in your package, this material starts on 17 through page 31. And the first one is Dr. Steph Voss, LLC. Recommended grant is $3,027.35. And as much as we're at that level, there's no required match. The post-completion operational requirements are for 3 years, with the equipment clause applying. Just briefly, Dr. Steph Voss, LLC is a chiropractic practice located in Grand Marais, providing chiropractic care, bodywork, acupuncture, and related wellness services. This practice opened in 2023 and serves residents and visitors throughout Cook County. Just a quick summary of the project itself. Grant funds will support the purchase of updated chiropractic equipment, therapeutic tools, and patient education materials. The project will improve efficiency, support patient education, and enhance long-term sustainability of the practice itself. The Grant Review Committee recommended a reduction in the grant award, which was originally requested at $3,736, to exclude office furniture and storage items at a leased space. The project supports retention and continued growth of a locally owned healthcare business, providing specialized services here within Cook County. And I don't see Steph here.
Just for the record, she expressed that she wished that she could be here prior commitments, just so that you're aware.
Okay.
Maybe patience.
Any questions or comments regarding this particular grant proposal? We're move on to the next.
I just make one quick comment. So this applicant applied a couple years ago for a small grant, and part of our process was asking for an update on how that initial grant from 2024 impacted the business. And I think the most notable thing is that I think this business was primarily a mobile service, and since the 2024 award, which helped, I think, purchase a table a portable table. They are now operating in a leased office space at North Shore Health. So there's been a nice progression from mobile to permanent office kind of location, which our group I think suggested some really nice stability and controlled growth.
Thank you. Other questions or comments before we move on to the next one? Okay. The next grant application is Barron's Handcrafted Log Cabins LLC. The recommended grant is $15,000. Thus, the required match is $2,750. The post-completion operational requirements include a 5-year period and the equipment clause applying. Just a quick description of the business itself. Barron's Handcrafted Log Cabins LLC is a Grand Marais-based business specializing in handcrafted, full-scribed log cabins, restoration projects, and custom log construction. Established back in 2019, the business serves customers throughout Cook County and beyond while supporting skilled trade, employment, and local manufacturing activity. And just briefly about the project itself, grant funds will support the purchase and installation of a solar power system at the company's production facility. The project is intended to improve operational efficiency, reduce long-term energy costs, and increase production capacity. The applicant's project budget exceeds the minimum required matching investment and demonstrates private sector contribution to the project. The investment is expected to support continued business growth, retention of existing employment, and future workforce expansion. And Isaac Barron is our applicant representative. Nope.
Same thing applies. He was very, very apologetic. He was on vacation with his family, and he asked me if it was very important if he needed to cancel. So he's also unable to be here.
Okay, thank you. Questions or comments on this?
Just a comment, there's a post-completion operational requirement that's not here. This was recommended for approval contingent on the approval of a conditional use permit from the county that would allow this business to expand their workforce up to 5 people. So I think as it is now, he's limited in the number of people he can hire to maybe just his family. The conditional use permit for which he included in his application was applied for, the county would allow him to, I think, hire up to 5 people, and that was, for us, a pretty key part of this award. So it is a home-based business, but by securing a conditional use permit, they're now, or would potentially be able to hire 5 people and create some more jobs.
Good, thanks, Matt.
This applicant has received grant funds in the past, so.
Yeah, that's another good note to make. The previous award was towards an excavator, which was in 2025. That was a small excavator, and part of our discussion there was that it was a smaller home-based business, and the applicant was, I think, the sole employee at the time. So there's been some really great growth that we saw through the application materials. Really impressive, I think, and some documented workforce expansion as well.
So we're saying it's working?
Yes.
Yeah.
I reached the same conclusion. Okay, any other questions or comments regarding Barron's Handcrafted Log? Oh, full scribed log cabins. What is it? Do you know what full scribed is?
When you match logs together, you have to scribe them? I don't know. Otherwise it'd be a plan.
So he builds a cabin and then takes it apart and ships it to the location while they're put it back together again. So, yeah. It's like Tonka Toys.
Lincoln Logs.
Lincoln Logs, yeah.
Thank you, it's like Lincoln Logs.
Pretty much typical for construction.
That takes us then to our third of 3 for the afternoon, and that is Adria Davina Perez Ceramics LLC, doing business as Lincoln in Hamburg. Recommended grant is $7,098. The required match is $598. Post-completion operational requirements, 3 years, non-equipment clause applies. Just a quick description about the business. Adria Davina Perez Ceramics LLC, operating as Lichen and Ember, is launching a healthcare, education, and wellness coaching business focused on supporting women navigating perimenopause and menopause. The business combines evidence-based education, coaching, and community-based programming to address an identified service gap here in Cook County. Quick summary of the project itself. Grant funds will support professional certification training, curriculum development, educational resources, website development, and foundational business launch expenses associated with establishing a perimenopause education and coaching program. The project will provide local access to specialized health education services. And the Grant Review Committee recommended a reduction in the grant award. The original request was $7,392, simply to exclude promotional pins and stickers. The project is expected to support business creation, expand access to health resources, and create a foundation for future coaching and educational programming here in Cook County. And our applicant representative, Adria Perez, is here. All right.
Thanks for having me.
Any questions for Adria or any comments you wish to make? No?
I appreciated your follow-up. I mean, it was a very helpful elaboration on the details of your business and how you would make it work, and it's clearly that you're doing it for the good of the community, more so than anything else, and appreciate that.
Thank you very much.
I would also just add that I appreciate the education aspect, and might just be my family, but it's not right now,
Yeah, I hear that very frequently
Yeah.
from a lot of women,
Yeah.
that they are confused, they are struggling, and they need guidance and support. And our local healthcare providers are wonderful, as we all know, but they have very limited time that they can spend with their patients. And that helps fill that service gap, I think, by helping people prepare for their medical appointments, helping them have further understanding of what's happening to their bodies and what they can do with lifestyle changes, what they can do with medications and supplements, and then go to their providers and specifically have requests of like, I want to try this medication, or can you help me figure this out? And then they're making the best use of their time when they go into those appointments. I think it's a win-win for the patient and the provider as well, to have that additional support happening in the community.
Thank you. So as I mentioned at the outset, we'll vote on this package collectively, just as reminders that Steph Boss LLC, Barron's Handcrafted Log Cabins, and Adria Davina Perez Ceramics LLC. So is there a motion to approve Resolution 2026-18, approving the Business Development Fund grant awards and authorize execution of grant agreements?
I'll make a resolution to support 2026-18.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time to be here.
Okay, next item on the agenda is 2026-19, approving the preliminary 2027 budget request. At this point, I'll turn it over to Director Wakefield for a summary of proposal changes.
So yeah, thanks everyone. This is substantially the same budget that was presented at the last meeting, giving everybody some time to think about it. The only thing that I would make mention of note is upon receiving clarification of where the WTIP and other memberships are within the budget down in subscriptions, that is not in the advertising portion. So we actually just left the advertising portion as is. But if the board wants to still amend that, I just thought that basically we were trying to make sure we left money in there for the subscriptions that we had, and I can confirm that we do. Beyond that, I included, and hopefully everybody had the time to read it, a narrative justification for the budget. Happy to go through line by line, but I figure it's probably easier to just open it up for questions and comments because I hear that there are some.
I don't have questions or comments, just because we've gone through it a couple times.
Yeah, the narrative I thought was very well written, and it tells a good story. We had discussed previously the need for some supporting material, especially when we get in front of the county. I think there's still an opportunity for good news stories as it relates to the Business Development Fund from prior applicants. And so I want to remind you of that. That's kind of, I think, going to be an important piece as we move forward. The story that you tell, I think, is as I say, a clear one, but it's probably sufficient, not adequate. I would put it that way.
So my hope, just to clarify, once I'd gotten, essentially a budget approved by the EDA, then I knew what I'd be going to the county to explain. So I was hoping that what I had was sufficient for the purposes of the EDA.
Yes, for us.
But I recognize that there will be quite a bit more storytelling, narrative, presentation to get the county on board. It didn't make sense to me to prepare that if, say, there were going to be some line item vetoes from the EDA.
The grant group committee met and just had a general discussion about the business development fund request and the development opportunity fund request. And we didn't come up with any sort of committee consensus or recommendation, which is fine. We did float a few ideas and maybe shared some concerns, but also some optimism for this proposal. I think the one that I just want to bring to the forefront, and again, this is not representative of the committee as a group, this is just an idea that we kicked around. The thought that we discussed was combining these two funds, the Business Development Fund, Opportunity Fund, into a new fund, perhaps you would call it the Economic Development Fund, whatever. And request $200,000 and establish within that a budget for this grant program and a budget for this opportunity fund. We didn't want to reduce the amount of money available to the grant program. We wanted to preserve the $200,000 ask. But we also want to recognize that the concept of the opportunity fund is a good one. And perhaps there is a way to restructure this into a more broader economic development fund that can address and fund projects from all levels, small, medium, and very large, which is, I think, one of the things that this opportunity fund would intend to do over time. Just throwing numbers out there, say we were to request $200,000 and internally allocate $100,000 for the Business Development Fund grant program with a couple of deadlines, similar review process, and we were to allocate the remaining $100,000 to the savings account and maintain flexibility so that in the event that we received fewer applications, if we didn't max out the Business Development Fund account for that year, there'd be a clear path for the remaining funds instead of just rolling over into the next year to be potentially distributed to another round of applicants, as that would then be destined for this Opportunity Fund savings account. So there's a clear path for it. Right now, what we do with the leftover money is we just roll it over, roll it over. And I think we can do a little better than that and address some of these much larger projects that we could potentially, fund or access by having $500,000 in the bank in 3 to 5 years. It would also go the other way if we had $125,000 of business development grant fund requests that were awesome. We would have the flexibility to tap into that $100,000 kind of set aside for the opportunity fund and fund projects that we deemed eligible or beneficial to the economic development of Cook County. So it's not saying no to the opportunity fund or no to the business development fund, but it's maybe a way of thinking about it as a combination of the two ideas into something that, at the end of the day, achieves the same goal on all levels. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. In fact, I mean, my history on the EDA is not that long, but in 2024, the resources exceeded the demand on the business development fund. In 2025, it was the opposite. We ended up having to shut things down, I think it was in August. And here we are in 2026, and perhaps the resources exceed the demand. Not sure yet, but it ebbs and it flows, and having that flexibility that combining these two would provide, while targeting a certain amount for the opportunity and targeting a certain amount for the fund, for the grant fund, will enable us, I think, to play in that space and adjust as necessary. There's a lot of sense to that, I think.
I also, I don't know if you talked about it yet, but one thing we talked really high level about was having revolving loan fund as part of this component, which I think puts a completely different dynamic and opens up some better opportunities for getting money out to small businesses. It doesn't, reduces the need to always be a grant to do that. And I think part of a grant is when you truly don't have access to capital from, and there are other sources besides conventional banking sources to get you that, but to me that would really add a layer to help all of us.
Something
better.
Sorry, and just a response to that is that I have maybe discussed with Peter inviting Grady to give a presentation to us sometime in the next month or two about the revolving fund. Something as an individual I've looked into in depth, but I don't have the background and knowledge of the program from an EDA perspective or accounting perspective. So I think that would be a great way to complement this discussion if we could do that July, August, depending on availability of the appropriate representatives. And also, the grant, we have CSU and Lilly, IRRR pass-through thing going on. They have a really nice sources and uses document there, and they have a $25,000 grant from the EDA paired with like $1.9 million of private equity funding. They're also getting this infrastructure grant. I think my point is that I think this grant is, it's there for people who can't access capital, but it's also there to use in combination with these other programs. So I begged to talk to the CCL owners, and this $25,000 they got from us was key to keeping that momentum going in their project and accessing some of these other larger funding sources. I'm going back to the Mayhew's a project that's a much bigger $20 million project, and $25,000 to help cover the cost, provide cash to complete some unexpected environmental work early in the program. I think they're still trying to get that to the finish line, but it's there to provide, I think, cash to people in businesses that can't necessarily get it, sure, but it's also there to provide resources to organizations that are trying to leverage as much different funding from all sorts of sources, and it's very helpful.
One thought I had, two thoughts I had, see if I can remember them. The first one is, I believe, what do I know? But I believe, my impression is that a large part of why we have more funds than demand, as you say, is because of the guidelines and the process just getting refined. I appreciate when we see a grant request and then the committee's recommendation, getting lower, just like, hey, maybe not this part because it doesn't meet with the guidelines. I think having a tighter process is going to naturally slow down the use of the funds. My concern is clipping our director's wings. I don't want there to be a competition between small businesses and the EDA. And so if it's all in one pool, I feel like there could be that friction, not that. I just think it would be cleaner. I think it's a lot harder for our director to go after projects or visioning without a set budget, you know. Okay, it's the leftovers of the grant fund. That makes it hard, I think, to actually operate. But that's just my nature.
No, I agree with that part of it, but I think it also, we can address it with, let's say we have an idea of $100,000 split, but we still have the flexibility to come to the board, let's say maybe as a committee, and say, hey, there's one application, or these several applications, and we want to fund them all because they're just worthy. And to fund them all, we need an extra $10,000. And then we bring that to the full board can decide for themselves whether that's a worthy ask or not. So this would, as long as we have that capability, then I think we're okay.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. I think that the Opportunity Fund is a terrific idea, and we should support it, not just for the executive director, but the entire board. But even the best idea that would require quick reaction on the EDA's part would come to the board. And so, you know, ideas will need to get vetted and approved, and in some cases, perhaps a terrific idea that would fall under the umbrella of the opportunity portion of the budget might be at the expense of a couple of grants down the road, and depending on the quality of that idea and opportunity, that might be something that we would support. So that's the beauty of flexibility here. But I think we all work pretty well together, and in any case, we'll be driven by the facts, and we'll make decisions as a group. And so I don't necessarily see the risk for the competition. That's my opinion.
I appreciate that. That's helpful.
I think it's important the story that we tell, right? So I agree in general with the idea of the flexibility. Of course, it's easier if you can flex. But the story that we need to tell is that the Small Business Development Grant Fund has been and continues to be a strong return on the investment for county taxpayers, period. And we also see that we can get an even stronger return on the investment for those county taxpayer dollars by leveraging a higher percentage of the money we've been given by those taxpayers in a different way. So I like the idea of separation. I would ease it a little bit more, like I'm kind of like 125-75 or something. But in order to sell the story that you've articulated really well, I think, in this draft, I like the one we're reading today, we have to sell that idea of it eventually being a way of reducing the ask, that we no longer need to ask. And in order to do that, we have to build up the fund. So I think it would be important when we tell the story to tell the story of the Taconite Harbor project as a good example of here's a good space in which, look, they've articulated, I mean, how many millions, was that like $150 million of possible funds they articulated as being possibly accessible for those two different visions. Every single one of those is going to have either require matching funds or require investment, and the Opportunity Fund could be a way of investing in a professional grant writer who has a much higher likelihood of return on the investment for the amount invested to get the, you know, if we invest $50,000 to get $100 million, that's a good investment, right? So I don't know, I can see why you're saying the idea of keeping it together and flexible, but in terms of articulating the narrative that you're trying to sell, well, not just sell, but the narrative that you're trying to create, like, look, this is an investment fund, we get better return when we have the assets collectively put together. I can see why separation is important. And I really want to sell the story better of that the Small Business Development Grant Program has been refined judiciously, and that the evidence, if you look at those 37 businesses that have gotten funding, is that we're getting a good return on that. And the specifics around it are important for people to know.
I'm a big believer in telling the story, which is
Yeah,
why I
that's
talked
right.
about the deck and Lucas is all over that.
Which is also why I would say my one concern about the budget is that $2,000 that we set aside for professional development training for the board that we haven't used. My understanding from being director of online education programs for 20 years, he was victim to some of it, is that that particular model of what we looked at doing is actually not that effective and wouldn't be a good use of money. I would rather take those $2,000 and put them into the marketing thing and pay to tell our story better. That helps us get those grants that leverage something bigger that could be a Taconite Harbor win, 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 win. You know, like, let's go big, and telling our story well is something we have not historically done. We're getting much better at it. We're engaging individual grantees, we're gonna have the labels, we're gonna do those things, but I think $2,000 for animation company to put together something that tells the story of the vision that we're gonna enact for Taconite Harbor or something else, but could be better, money that would have more return for us.
Yeah, comments from me coming back to which I think is probably the big issue on the table, which is the business development fund versus opportunity. They both need a great story.
Yeah.
Couldn't agree more. As we look at 2027, I don't know what opportunities are going to be presented to us yet that would be applicable to the opportunity fund. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't have a clear understanding of the demand for the small business development fund yet, because I don't have a crystal ball. So for me, we're not giving anything up in terms of storytelling or this novel approach of the opportunity fund by treating them as one bucket. And as the year unfolds, we as a group will discuss, maybe argue, ultimately agree on just what that allocation looks like, based on the facts in front of us at the time.
Just one more comment, you know, we've got one more review period ahead of us, and we'll see how much traction we get then, how much interest, how many requests we receive, and that'll kind of be the end of our first year with this deadline cycle, which I think will be very valuable information paired with the last 2 years, 24, 25 of data as well, where it was, we were underwhelmed and overwhelmed. I think with the changes in the program administration, paired with this deadline cycle, at the end of this year, we'll have a good sense of what 27 will look like. At which point, we could probably more comfortably land on a specific number that could potentially be just 100% allocated to the business development fund moving forward. I just don't know what this year's gonna look like. And I think that it is possible that we hit $200,000 and have some really great businesses to support. And I don't want to lose sight of that, especially coming off of 2025 where we maxed out by the end of the summer. We have lots of really great success stories already that have been generated from that line.
I think time is part of the equation here. We really did just pile us up into making these changes, like Dave mentioned, about how the program's gonna work. And it just needs more time. And everything's seasonal anyways. It might be a little quiet now, but 3 months from now, you might get flooded. We don't know.
In September.
So I feel like this
I don't
conversation
mean
though
September specifically, but you know what I mean.
maybe isn't understanding what Lucas has proposed in terms of the point of the opportunity fund is withholding the assets explicitly to get a very particular kind of investment that is very different than what we're doing in the small business fund. And so compartmentalizing it's a very different story to tell, right? Doing an endowment is different than raising money to cover your expenses. He's asking for an endowment kind of vision, like let's build our assets so we have the ability to act. And we've been able to do that in the past because of some players who were on this board who had deep pockets that they could just make a few phone calls and raise a lot of private equity. This is well before I ever, I think none of us were on the scene back in the day. But I don't think we are those people. Maybe we are, and some of you are hiding your deep-pocketed friends who come to the table and like, whoosh. But I understand why Lucas is saying this would make us a lot more nimble than we are currently.
Well, and I think the way that I would frame it is to try to the extent possible, while recognizing how valuable this program is, because it's very unique. In fact, I've gotten calls literally from other economic developers in the state saying, can you explain the grant program, because I'd like to do something like that. That's actually happened. So you have eyes on this program, people are proud of it and admire some of it around the state. So I'm not saying do away with it entirely. What I am saying fundamentally is, to the extent possible, I think it behooves the EDA to try to transition from a fundamentally reactive organization to a proactive organization. And so when you have something like a small business development grant fund, it's fantastic, but you're waiting for those asks to come to you, and there's value in that. But a lot of the bigger projects, you had a presentation this evening about Taconite Harbor. No matter what vision we're going down, I can promise you that this will be involved, right? And if we choose there's going to be that. I've had many conversations with people who would like to work on some novel solutions to take the 15 part-time agriculture workers that own part-time hobby farms in the county and bring them up to being full-time and be able to survive on that. That I think is something that if we had a nucleus of local match dollars ready to go that the EDA could deploy, we could lead that out in a way that does not involve us needing to sort of run around with a cup out hoping that we can find funds. Not to say that we're not going to try to do that. Obviously I want to bring in as many partners as possible. It's not my goal to put everything on the burden, on the shoulders of local taxpayers. Simply to say that to the extent possible, as we sell the golf course, as we consider, what the EDA is going to look like moving forward over the next 5, 10, 15 years, I just want to set us up with the ability to be nimble and proactive, to the extent possible, while recognizing that this is taxpayer dollars. These are taxpayer dollars, and we need to be really good stewards of that. So I think that'd be the long and short of my argument.
What about 50, 150, and then if the 150 for the Small Business Development Fund doesn't get fully allocated, it rolls into the supporting the other 50. So that there's a separate line item, so there's a story to tell, and there's an evidence pile that says, no, we made that commitment.
Yeah, I'm not seeing the significance of actually identifying a specific line item, 150, 100, right? Or 150, 50. I think we're all capable of understanding a $200,000 fund for whatever reason, business development grant or opportunity, and then just kind of maybe at the beginning of the year decide for ourselves how much we're going to commit to one or the other, and then have the flexibility to roll over funds into one and the other if we don't use it, or tap into the other fund if we do deem it necessary. We as a board can make that decision at any time we wish, at any point. And why wouldn't we want that ability to make that decision? If something came before us that we all wanted to act upon, why can't we act on it? We should be able to act on it. So I'm more in favor of flexibility. Maybe having a stated goal, like you mentioned, $300,000, $500,000. That's the goal. Let's build the fund up to that number, whether it's 5 years, 6 years, 4 years. That's the goal. Use it when we see fit. Replenish it.
There's one argument that I've heard for the opportunity fund that I don't like. None.
Yeah. So
the flexibility and our ability to make decisions. We set a target at $500,000 in 2032, and we should be checking ourselves. Are we on pace to get there? It's an entirely reasonable thing, I think, to do.
I'm certainly not saying that anybody who's arguing in favor of flexibility is wrong. All I want to call attention to, sort of the rationale, the calculus that I've been doing is, trying to be responsive and respectful of our funding partners and what their concerns that they've raised with me are. And that there is a perception amongst some of the individuals at the county that are in decision-making positions that there's a certain level of opacity with what the EDA chooses to do or not do and how it chooses to do it or not do it, and I am not here to debate whether or not that's accurate. Other than to say my fear going into budgeting of setting it all up as sort of one fund to be determined however you like, we're just going to have to do a really good job, and that would fall to me if that's the direction of the board, to express to the county that that's what may happen, because I fear that the perception may be, well, we funded you for this and now you're over here using it for this instead. And I just want to be very mindful and careful that we don't accidentally, unintentionally give off that by sort of saying it's all in one big pile. I do recognize that the EDA, once funded, has the ability to manage its own budget, move money wherever, whenever it chooses. Just to say that was sort of one of my primary considerations. Just to put it out there into the ether, not that it has to guide you guys. I just want to give you that perspective.
Just calling it the grant fund, so one fund called grant fund. You're not really specifically saying what it's business development or it's opportunity. I think we're okay with that, But we can line item, or if the goal is to reserve $500,000 for such an opportunity type of project, we can keep track of that. It's part of our budget. They keep part of the financial records with the public, so they can see what we're doing with the money and what intent is. And I think also the one thing that didn't get mentioned again, maybe it was earlier, but the idea is that once we reserve $500,000, then the ask is $100,000 less of the county each and every year. So if that would be something that we would be, I don't know how to communicate that, but that would be the goal, I guess, once the fund has reached its number. So there's an incentive there too. So
I think I'd be cautious to say that when we hit this mark, we're going to ask for less. Because, 5 years from now, $200,000 doesn't get you much. $500,000 might not get us much 5 years from now. I think we keep our foot on the gas, and then I'm sorry to say something like that, but if our job is to promote economic development, we need to promote that. That's what I think.
That's her point.
It's hard to pitch you.
No, that's very true. And 100,000 may sound a lot, but it's where your vision with that, it's still just a very small drop in the bucket of what your larger picture.
But it puts us in the realm of
It
match
starts.
for low $1 million worth of outside funding, right?
But people, when people understand, like, it's just a small part of a match or something. So.
For what it's worth, when Lucas first shared the idea of the opportunity fund with me, Mr. Gamble, don't choke on this. I said, well, I would like to keep the grant fund whole and go for $100,000 for the opportunity fund. I understand that that's not. It's not palatable to all, and I really do appreciate flexibility in me being me, but I also just really want to be as clear with our intentions as possible when we're bringing the budget forward. So I don't know how to reconcile that exactly. Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
That's nice.
Just in response to that, I would just say my biggest concern is cutting the grant program in half.
Yeah.
That's what it is. And I feel like with what you just said, being as intentional and clear with what we're intending on doing with this money as possible, maybe there's a schedule that we develop that in year one is we request $150 for the grant program and $50,000 for the opportunity fund. Next year, after we have a full calendar year of this deadline schedule of our revised guidelines in place, and we have a year history of grants, we'll see what that number comes in, and maybe it's around 150, maybe it's a little above, but at that point, we have a discussion next year, so then we can take that data and increase our ask for the opportunity fund in the second year of this. I mean, it feels to be going from zero for the opportunity fund to $100,000 in one budget is a lot.
Yeah.
So perhaps there's a way to make a request for a smaller amount, and at year's end is look at what we've distributed right now in 2026, and then next budget cycles, perhaps ask for more.
Well, I would one more time say bring in revolving loan fund as another option.
Sure.
You've short, then your picture looks a little bit better of what you can offer out to small businesses and still keep on track developing the opportunity fund. I really think that's a huge missing component of this.
Absolutely.
And the grant fund's great, but that's what we could use, and it belongs within EDA to do.
Zero question about that.
Yeah,
Complementary tools, I mean, the grant works very well with the revolving fund, which can only fund 32% of a project. But you can utilize another bank loan and grant money to make up the rest, and it's a perfect combination.
And I think this picture starts to look better of what we can do and where this can go.
Yeah, I hear you, cutting the grant fund in half, but I don't know how much we can do with 50 grand either, you know? I mean, something, it's a start.
It's a start, and next year it might double.
It might be 50 plus
Plus the
regulation 26.
Yeah.
You know, the reality is, we talked about flexibility, and I've made an argument for flexibility. You know, a year from now, or a year from August or September, we might be in a position where we need to move money around within our budget, and we're gonna have that conversation, and make those decisions. So we're always gonna retain a degree of flexibility. 150-50 sounds better to me. We're not giving up flexibility because we can inject ourselves at any point in the process.
Just because I like to
Move it forward.
No, well, I do like that too, but I like to try to think about things from all angles and really value people's experience and thoughts. I was wondering if Commissioner Campbell might have thoughts on that. Our discussion regarding opportunity fund, revolving loan fund, because you will be involved in the discussion when it comes to the county board.
I appreciate that, and I've had discussions with Lucas. What I would say just foundationally, I believe that, and express this in my discussion with Lucas, that I believe he brings tools to the table that the EDA needs. And I think that any organization, it starts with leadership. I think the narrative that informs his budget is good. Do I agree with the recommendations? Honestly, no.
Sure.
And so that's what I would say. And I say the no, not because if I were simply looking at the EDA, my recommendations would be based upon the credibility, the evidence base in the context of the whole picture of governance in Cook County. And that's the challenge that is before us. We had a presentation of soil and water today. We have money that we're distributing in many different fronts that is levy-dependent money. And when you look at soil and water and their effect on the county, the whole county, those are the challenging decisions that need to be made. And so what I say is bring your narrative, well-reasoned, give us the evidence that we have to weigh in relationship to all of the things that we're evaluating. So I'd say that there's good things that are substance-based in the narrative that presents the budget, but until I take that and put it in the big context as just one commissioner, it's challenging.
No, I appreciate that, and I guess I was more curious about your thoughts on the two different funds.
But here's what I would say, I would agree with it, and years ago, as a director of a not-for-profit organization, it was encouraged that if you don't set up an endowment fund, if you don't create some fund, organizations will not be in business because the margins are getting smaller. And so this is why I suggested that we contact the gentleman from the University of Minnesota, because of the untapped wealth exists. If you can match wealth with shared value with people that are willing to invest and create that. And I would use the revolving loan as an example, because the revolving loan was something that we championed at the legislature, and the legislature gave it the money because they believed in that shared value. And that has served us really well, and we've had good results as a result of that over the years. So I believe the direction in creating the funding source. The other thing is those that have money can respond to opportunity. And when I was marketing director for IBM's credit union, that was said over and over again. And financial institutions that can respond to market opportunity were able to take advantage of this. So the idea and the concept is solid. It's just how do we get there when it comes to, is it on the back of the taxpayer, or is it through our creativity and ingenuity that we try to tap into resources? That's why, well, I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Oh, thanks for your, I appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Do we need to make a decision on that?
Well, we've got a resolution that we need to make a motion on. I'm gonna suggest I'm sorry, I wanna go back to something that Commissioner Anderson said. There was $2,000 in the question.
Oh, yeah.
Move from where to where?
I would move them from the professional development of us with an online tool.
Is board member training for 2,000 into marketing, I think?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And I would also amend the proposal to reduce the opportunity by 50 and increase the business development by 50, taking it to 150.
So are you, okay, so these are two suggestions to change the budget, is that what you're saying, two line items? Okay.
Lucas, what are your thoughts on the board training versus marketing?
I mean, I would like at some point, and I haven't looked to see, I have really good success in Staples, where the mayor, and we were working on getting a couple of the other board members, I believe it's annually, U of M Extension offers an Economic Development 101 course. And in fact, it's John from Duluth that was one of the professors on that, and he's really great. I would recommend you all take that course, but there is a fee involved. I'd be happy to take it with you, but I think it really did help give the mayor of Staples, and then as we were going on, we were going to bring on the rest of the EDA board there to bring them through that process, because it gave them some insights and some perspective on economic development that they didn't necessarily have. So in that respect, I'm hoping that I can convince all of you that we should do that as a board. But it doesn't have to be this coming year. If you want to move the money, I don't have an opinion on whether it's better spent on training or marketing, other than to say that I'm a big fan of training.
I would want to continue to keep that as a line item in the budget. It's something we talked about for a couple of years now, and we have newer board members. And I know even across in the city, I wish our council people paid more attention to that. I mean, league training is frankly free. So I want that on there as a line item. And we can have different themes to what it entails, but part of it is just knowing how to operate on a board. And then, like you said, you have a theme that's really more focused on, doesn't need to be an EDA, whatever, great. but I would like it there.
You know, what we had talked about previously was, not EDA training, and I can see the value there, and I'm very curious and interested, but just public board training, because there's a lot of laws and hoops we need to be aware of, and it's very important.
Is there a version of this where we could leave it as is and move money out of the contingency fund into marketing?
I don't have super strong, it's just a recommendation, I'm not gonna go to the mat on it by any means.
I think there's a need to develop marketing resources like you're suggesting, but I don't think I think they're two different things. Let's find money for marketing and let's keep this line item for board training in place.
Yeah, it shouldn't be an either or. Yeah, 'cause you had contingency.
Yeah, there's a contingency that makes some of those things.
And, Commissioner Anderson, from your perspective, is $1,000 adequate for marketing, or I have no marketing experience, so I don't know.
That number is just for the website
Oh,
maintenance, so it's really not.
Gotcha.
It's not paying anyone to develop
Gotcha.
anything.
The other WTIP,
The underwriting.
opportunity.
But that's under the
And that's-
subscription.
That's it, so.
Line item.
And I apologize, but I have to go soon.
I bet you a few people's stomachs are going.
My never stops.
So we'll scratch that suggested change, but my suggested change is still on the table. Any other amendments to the budget as proposed?
I would only say that if we, for all remaining funds in the business development grant that are not committed by year end, we roll over into the opportunity.
Including breakage from previously granted awards that for a variety of reasons might not get fully completed.
Okay. It sounds like a great compromise and very practical.
So, no addition to marketing?
Correct.
With the thought in mind, there's contingency. Okay.
All right, is there a motion to approve?
I'll motion to approve as amended.
Thank you.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, good job with this. We saw the budget.
Congrats.
Thank you all. Really appreciate. Well, it's okay. I mean, this is it. We need to have a unified perspective as a board.
All right, next item is 2026-20, approving the 2025 financial audit of Cook County EDA, which includes Superior National Golf Course. It's worth noting this is one of the earliest audit completions the EDA has ever had. Well done, our treasurer and bookkeeper. The memo, I believe on page 41, summarizes the findings. I'll turn it over to Mr. Shackleton.
Yeah, so, the findings of it are recurring because of the lack of management, the separation of duties that are inherent of our organization in the golf course. So there's really nothing new that we can address there. What was new was that some of the bills were late paid last year because of the cash flow problems the golf course had. And so some of those bills due got paid later, but that was something new versus previous years, but we're just gonna jump in cash at that time. Other than that, next year will be the last year of an audit with the golf course attached to the audit, so our fee is still $26,500 for next year, but the year next, when there's no golf course attached to the audit, our fee will drop down to about $12,000-13,000. So we're gonna save a significant amount of money in 2027, so, or 2028. Yeah, right at 2027.
Okay, good, thank you. Is there a motion to approve resolution 2026?
I had one question that made me a little uncomfortable, was Hyder Brothers LLC. There was no invoice. Is that, I tried to Google them, and is that a tractor for the golf course? Is it a tractor part or something? That was the only thing I could find. This is on page 104 of the packet, but it says 103 in blue. 2025-03, lack of supporting documentation. I'm assuming all of this is golf course, I mean.
Yeah, this is golf course, yeah, so they were unable to produce unemployed.
And I recognize Isaac Hansen, or
Yeah,
right, I was like.
Yeah, and that happened. The issue is the golf course management. We have a groundskeeper, and we have a pro shop guy. And so those two individuals are in charge of their respective departments. There's not enough management oversight, like, to make sure this kind of stuff doesn't happen, right? So, it gets piled up in a folder, sent over to the accountant does her thing, and is it this and that's it, yes. Okay. It's really not ideal, but the management of the golf course has never been set up as ideal, so. Yep.
Okay.
So I'll move on.
Yeah.
Thank you. Is there a second? Any other questions or comments? No? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, 2026-20 passes. 2026-21, this next item is regarding a development agreement with Dream Superior LLC for the Sisu and Molu Infrastructure Improvement Project. I'll turn it over to Ms. Wakefield for further details.
So as some of you may know, at IRRB's most recent meeting, they approved the ask that the EDA, and this would be my predecessor, Teresa, I think they did a lot of the work for this, submitting this on their behalf for an infrastructure project, that those funds were awarded, and now, we're essentially signing, because we're the fiscal host, right? It'd be us signing the agreement to pass through. But yeah, so this will be for the work into the project.
A motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries. All right, this one is going to look familiar to many of you that have been around for a while. Other participants come back around again. 2026-22, resolution approving an amended and restated declaration of covenants, conditions, and restrictions for the Four Directions Dwelling Workforce Housing Project. I'll turn it over to Lucas, but this might be fresher to you than it is to us, so I think you can get there pretty quick.
Sure. So, really quick, one of the very first things that was, sort of came onto my plate when I accepted the role was discussion on the challenges relating to filling the units. These are workforce housing units, specifically because the definitions within what was allowable precluded employers paying for providing that housing. Right. So in other words, people that needed workforce housing could themselves come and rent directly from this establishment, but their employer could not on their behalf sign a lease for like multiple employees. And the point that was made to us was, how is this useful? If the goal is to have workforce housing, you want to try to remove the barriers. What difference does it make if it's a local employer or a local individual who's working for a local employer sort of paying the lease? And that made a lot of sense to me. And so we had these conversations and said, look, can we change what the definition of qualified member is, and sort of broaden it out to not just be individuals that need workforce housing, but to be locally based employers with some protections to make sure that this is not a non-local employer, right? There's some definition in there, as you probably read, just to ensure that the housing still is available for what it was originally intended for, but to give them more freedom and flexibility to actually fill the units. Because basically their point was, hey, we have unoccupied units that we have businesses that are local that would love to fill with employees, but they can't just for various reasons. So this amendment is a big enough change that it's going to require both your approval and we're going to have to go to the county commission to have them review and approve or not approve. But really, I think it's a no-brainer. I mean, it's, you're not...
There's some history, but But
Most commissioners are well versed in it because we've been through this more than once, I think. Sorry, go ahead.
Very well articulated. I support your proposal.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve 2026-22?
And I guess I don't know if it came up, but this is language from Freiberger Law, so this isn't like, I didn't write this. This has been reviewed, and, but just to make sure that it's on the record.
I'll make a motion for 2026-23.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, 2026-23, this was the late add to the agenda. And this is authorizing expenditure for professional services with Terra Firm in the amount not to exceed $9,664. And this regards Superior National Golf Course, more specifically for the septic system. And this is for the design and management of staying to get the septic system up to code, which is our obligation for we're done with Superior National. The work might get done at the closing, and that will be subject to escrow. But this is our first significant step in the septic program.
I need to clarify, for the minutes, I said 2023, but it was 2022, our last resolution. So now this one is 2023, I don't know if. I'll make a motion for 2026-23 now. Great.
I'll second that.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Carries. Thank you very much.
Did that come in where you wanted?
Lower than what we were expecting. Well, this is okay.
It was the middle
This is
range.
right. Well, this isn't, of course, the septic yet. This is the
Planning.
design.
Oh.
Yeah.
No, Scott is.
No, the septic will be.
You don't get a septic system for $9,000.
Oh, I didn't know you were redoing the whole set, never mind.
Yeah,
I didn't realize you were redoing the whole set.
If that was, I'd be doing that. The next item on the agenda is the SBDC report. Although I didn't see it in the deck.
So Rochelle did not submit a report as such, but Northland sent over the statistics.
Oh, okay.
So that would be page 132, right near the end, talking about the clients served from the period May 1st to May 31st. 9 unique entrepreneurs and or businesses met with her. Number of new clients was 3, and number of hours of business assistance provided was 12. To the extent.
How much interaction do you have with Rochelle, say, in the last 30 or 60 days?
She's been in pretty frequently. To my knowledge, you may have met with some outside of the EDA, HRA, SBDC office, but she's been having those meetings internally. So I can confirm that work is going on, and haven't heard anything contrary from anyone else.
Has there been any, I haven't spoken to anyone in Northland, have you by chance?
Yes.
Okay.
So this is all, it's all good. This is what that came from them. So this report now automatically is going to come every month because I set that up with Northland. So
Good job.
but I will endeavor to try to get Rochelle to be here. I'm just not sure I've made it clear enough that the expectation is that she's here. So if you'll forgive me, we'll make sure that.
I don't have that expectation necessarily. It is nice, but I don't know. Want more information just to sit here through the whole thing and then say our numbers.
Yeah, if she's engaged in the community, that's where the energy ought to be. So it's always nice to see her, but we don't necessarily need a performative thing. And her sitting here for 3 hours is not what she needs.
This meeting has never gone for 3 hours.
We're working on
It's
this.
a first.
I'm just trying to get warmed up for this.
Never say never.
But staying relatively close to her and getting feedback from Northland.
Well, and to be clear, from my perspective, we have a very good working relationship.
That's important. Okay. Thank you. Great, we're almost there. So just give me a couple more minutes.
I saw her earlier this week. Great.
Yeah, very positive. Okay, Commissioner and committee reports. First one is the golf course. I'm confused. Okay. So we've got 14 days remaining in the right of first refusal. I expect that all 14 days will expire before we get notice from the Nelson family of their disinterest in wanting to take the deal, which is fine. We've been able to use that time to good purpose. The golf committee met on June the 4th, I believe, and we had a report out from Mike Larson. Interestingly, the existing irrigation system, and I made some note of this, I think, in our last meeting, it's currently producing about 300 gallons a minute. It has the capability of producing 300 gallons a minute. SNL requires in the neighborhood of 200 gallons a minute. So based on, and I'm over my skis here, but based on the shifting beach at where the intake is, the intake is more than is what's required. Now we, of course, can't ignore the fact that as recently as last year, they were only getting 40% of the required water intake. So, you know, we're not out of the woods yet necessarily, but irrigation is working as it needs to. So what this does is it just opens up the opportunity, I stress opportunity, to discuss with the buyer possible alternatives to fully connecting to the water district. Our plan as a result of the June 4th meeting is to let the right of first refusal period expire, and we know who our buyer is, very likely Brady Hatcher, and then we'll begin to negotiate the elements of the escrow that remain, key among them, how to approach the irrigation. So I don't necessarily want to negotiate it in its open forum here, but we'll let those negotiations move forward. What we don't necessarily want to do is, of course, spend big money to connect to the water district unnecessarily, and so our position will be something different. Regarding the water district connection, Bar Engineering has done an estimate, and that is in the neighborhood of, not the neighborhood, the midpoint is $190,000 for the connection. The buyer would have the option of a more sophisticated control valve for an extra $60,000, which that'll be up to Brady Hatcher if, I stress, if we go down that path. So $190 for the irrigation. If we can get to a position where we've got, say, a contract with a supplier, that 150% required at escrow also should be negotiated away. There's no reason to have 150% of a signed contract, so that'll be something else that will get addressed in the month of July into August. Septic. So the test drilling results, we've got 12 inches of soil credits. So that's subject to Cook County concurrence, but that's good news. I don't know much about septic systems, but the 12 inches of soil means a less intrusive septic system. So that would leave the clubhouse septic fix at a neighborhood of $145,000. In our pro forma at 150%, we were talking about, I think, 230% and 274.
Top range is 180, low range is 110.
Yeah, but again, we get into an actual contract, you don't have to concern ourselves necessarily with 150%.
So it's an estimate, so we have a legitimate estimate from a professional that should be good enough to present to the buyer without that escrow.
So that'll all be part of that escrow negotiation, and our ability to reduce that 150 makes closing a lot easier. So just quickly, next steps, early July, post right of first refusal, we'll meet with the buyer and begin those negotiations on escrow. If we go down the path of the water district connection, we'll have a more deep dive in the July meeting on just what that looks like, so the board's fully across it, and then we get into bids and locking down with the contractor. That's the golf course. Any questions on the golf course? All right. Grant Review Committee?
Just real quick, we have started looking at guidelines and just basic revisions for this year, and I think a target timeline to have something approved by the board is going to be October, so we can publish those guidelines and dates for next year by November. So we'll be on it and get feedback from the group and have a similar process as we did last year, so.
Thanks for all your work on that committee. HR committee, anything? So, finance? Talk numbers enough. Just one final thing for me, it's a reminder that we've got the ribbon cutting for the new wastewater transfer station on Friday, June the 26th. That's 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. I suppose the dog and pony show will be closer to 10 a.m. and then the rest of it's open house with looking days. If you're able to make that, please do so. Executive Director report.
I've got 3 really quick things. First one is, thank you so much for giving me the leeway to go to the EDA conference down in Brainerd. It was very good as always, made good connections, and met several of the individuals that we're in principle now going to be working with. So there may be, depending on, and I'll explain this in the second point, some grant opportunity that we're going to be potentially pursuant to all of you guys' sign off on the actual application. But anyway, EDM was good. Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure. It's great seminars, great partnerships. The second thing then we'll move into is we joined with 5 counties. I had mentioned this in passing, what was that last meeting and the meeting before, that we were working with the coal impacted communities, the 5 counties in the state that have current or former coal sites. That we were considering putting in, and this was partially led by Carla Deed, so she was here, she just left. So she's been involved in that process to do workforce training initiatives funded by Just Transition organization. And so we have, as of now, put together a narrative sort of as a pre-application saying, we'd like to come in, would you allow us to apply as a consortium, essentially? The likely outcome of that would be, and this is really in our favor on a relative pound for pound basis because you're up against much more populous counties, that we'd be getting about $40,000 to do workforce retraining initiatives. I will say that it's going to behoove us, provided that we submit this application, provided that we get funded for it, we're going to probably need to go a slightly different direction than some of the other counties. So several of the other counties are looking at sort of post-incarceration, sort of redevelopment of skills. It's not that that's not important, it's just that on a relative basis, we don't have a lot of those people. Right?
The only people incarcerated in this county that we all know, we don't want back in the workforce.
Well, so basically, I'm just suffice it to say that I think that there are really good workforce development opportunities here. I'm imagining if we can potentially set up, and this is out over my skis a little bit, so we'll have to continue this conversation, provided that you give me permission to sign on to the grant proposal, if and when we're invited to apply. I'm imagining it probably as some kind of like an apprenticeship program for several of the businesses that would otherwise are kind of in limbo looking for transition, of which we have several. If we could provide some support, whether that be back end or front end, to help them build that, I think that could be very valuable. Although at this juncture, I'm open to suggestions and I'm open to future partnerships. I know that Higher Ed's doing a few things up here and that they're going to be a good partner in all of this. We'll see what happens, but I just wanted to inform you that that's happening and that it's going to be a good partnership. So I'm happy about that. And then the last thing I wanted to bring up in relation to what you heard here tonight vis-a-vis Taconite Harbor and the presentation by Stantec. I won't necessarily take any action on this in any kind of formal capacity until you all have had time to think about what I'm about to say going into the next meeting. But what seems very clear, the through line to all of this, is that if we're going to be as a community, whether that be whatever the partnership, coalition, patchwork that comes together in order to do something, the primary consideration is going to be some level of control and influence over that parcel. Okay, Now, that's not to say that I'm gonna come back in 6 months and say, okay, we need to come up with X number of $1 million to make an offer to Minnesota Power. What I am saying is two things. Number one, I would like to, after the July meeting, provided that everybody's okay with it, call together a very broad coalition of the potentially willing to have a sit-down meeting and say, the visioneering is done, the initial visioneering is done. Stakeholders that are now here in the room with us, how do we see this being pushed forward, right? What resources can come to the table, what champions, what might an initiative or next steps look like, what's feasible? And so to tell you, like those partners, right? You're talking, Schroeder Township, you're talking Cook County, you're talking the EDA, as well as IRRR, Arrowhead Regional Development, Minnesota Deed, probably the governor's office, potentially the future governor's office. My point is I want to cast a really broad net, get as many people, Minnesota Power, obviously, get as many people at the table as possible to have that conversation with the probable, and again, I don't know for sure, but the probable step thereafter, if there seems to be a willingness to move forward, would probably be some kind of consideration for the right of first refusal on the property, with some ability to go on and do testing and to do other sort of more invasive things like finding out what the mitigation costs and concerns would actually be. Because we're not going to have access to that site meaningfully, I think, without something like that. So, any thoughts on that? That's just a report out of what I see as...
Maybe meet with the Taconite Harbor subcommittee too and talk about that.
Well, I would say that's number one. And make a review of what we started and what we thought about and our thoughts as a group about where this landed. I think we need to have a recap conversation about how this project, where it sits at.
Well, and that's, again, I wouldn't want to do anything until after the next meeting. Like I said, I just wanted to put that on
I
there.
just mean what's your first step? That would be the first step, is we'll sit right here first as a group and gather our thoughts about this.
Oh, I thought you meant the advisory.
Well,
No,
I mean,
yeah,
the
okay,
advisory, or whatever, but before we think about, all those other players sound good at a bigger level at another time, but first, I think we need a recap, or we need to sit down as a smaller group, right, whatever.
Well, I will say that I don't think much of anything happens without some kind of control over the land. I really have a hard time believing we're gonna spend money and resources and Minnesota Power is just gonna wait until a good idea pops up and go, yeah, maybe we'll do that. Or, no, I guess, that solar thing might happen in about 10 years. Maybe we'll just sit on this land until it's more feasible. So why would we waste time and money and energy on something that may or may not happen? It's someone else's decision. So I agree. At least controlling, somehow having control over that property, yes.
Yeah. But I think we just need a smaller recap to realign where we thought we started and where we ended up on this project, which to me is not quite what we, anyways. And we did look into just transitions when we first were trying to figure out where we could get money for this project. And then I looked out at some of those other coal communities, especially out in Wyoming or out in the East Coast, and they did have different issues. Like they had absolutely no broadband, which meant they absolutely had no ability to effectively provide retraining to their residents. And things they wanted were just basically even training about how to form an EDA. It was very interesting where some of those communities were and what qualified for that kind of training funding. So I think there's some real possibilities that we're a step ahead of some people that way. Like broadband is not our issue. It's not where we need to spend money to help a community move forward.
Well, and I would say, we're way out ahead of this still, but there is sort of second order dollars related to this. If we got funding and then had an outcome that we needed more funding for, there's potentially more, that Just Transition has. So I would say if we move forward, think of this as like phase one.
Multiple phases to this. This is like a many-year plan.
Thank you for the update. I just realized that I skipped your agenda item.
Super quick. So really, it's just I wanted to, just get the board consensus on making it a requirement for grantees to submit photo documentation of their grant funded projects. Right now, it's an option, and I'd like to make it a requirement, so we can all see what's happening, see success stories. Paired with that is I'd like to, we talked about this, Lucas and the grant review committee, but including final report forms in our meeting agenda packets as they are generated, so that not only this board, but also community members, county officials can also see these success stories as they happen. That would be with sensitive information redacted as necessary, so we're not divulging any secrets. So those two things, making a requirement, if your project can be photographed, to photograph it and submit it to us in your final report. So we'd have to add that to the form in the contract, and then including the final reports in our monthly agenda packets. That's it.
Pretty logical.
Yeah.
I'll move to make those changes.
Second?
Second.
Yeah.
All those in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none? Okay.
And I presume you want that active prior to the current round of grants, that,
Yes,
just to make sure.
possible. Right away.
Yeah, okay, so we'll include that in, that language for this cycle.
Yeah.
All right, our next meeting is Tuesday, the 21st of July. Is there a motion to adjourn to June 16th? Let's spend some more time on that. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Does that mean some kind of like a large online meeting?
Are you ready?
Thank you, sir.
Absolutely.
Pleasure.
Right.